Hey there, welcome to the week 11 video overview. So we're finishing up chapter 5 this week, which is more on trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosecant. And with all the functions in precalculus, remember we have these big goals, which is how do you simplify each type of function? How do you solve each type of function? How do you write or model given data? Each of those functions, graphing those functions using transformations, moving them and flipping them and stretching them, and then solving application problems that involve those types of functions. So we're just kind of going through that process with these trig equations. So for 5.4 through 5.6, this week's assignments, we're going to be graphing more of these things. We're going to be graphing tangents and secants and cosecants. The previous sections graphed sines and cosines and tangents. We're going to be, or sines and cosines without tangents. We're going to be writing equations of these sines and cosines given data. In other words, we're going to be modeling sines and cosines. We're going to be solving these trig equations. It actually takes a bit of work to solve these trig equations. So this is sort of part one, which is how do you undo a trig equation? What's the inverse of a sine function, for example? And the math people don't have any smart words for it. They just call it the inverse sine function. So we start learning about the inverse sine function, how that undoes sine in a way that square roots undo squares or things like that. Division undoes multiplication. That's the big step of solving trig equations. And then finally, we're going to be solving some application problems involving sines and cosines. Okay, something to sort of think about. We're going to be using radians a lot more. We started transitioning from degrees to radians in the chapter 5 sections 1 through 3, and now that we've made it to 5.4, 5.5, and 5.6, we're going to be using radians a lot more. Remember, 360 degrees is a complete rotation using the measurement called degrees, and 2 pi radians is a full rotation using the measurement system called radians. So 2 pi is the full rotation, and 2 pi radians is about the same as 6.28 radians, which is kind of strange to use a decimal for the complete rotation, but 6.28 radians is a full rotation, or more precisely, 2 pi radians is a full rotation. So if you haven't gotten the radian bug, time to step up and start thinking everything in terms of radians, since moving forward, we pretty much use exclusively radians instead of degrees in all higher level math and related disciplines. Okay, again, there's lots of vocabulary and notation, so make sure to write that stuff down, keep track of it in your notes, so you don't have an overwhelming number of things to try to keep track of and memorize. Reminder, each different function has a new technique for simplifying it and a new technique for solving it. So try to resist the temptation of always trying to think in terms of what you learned in linear equations. Each different type of thing, quadratics, square roots, logarithms, and sines and cosines, they all have different methods for simplifying and solving. So kind of keep that in mindset. Keep your list of formulas for simplifying, and as we're going to be learning our formulas for solving as well. By the way, luckily, the strategy for graphing and modeling and doing applications is pretty much the same for every different type of function. The only things you really have to be concerned with are simplifying and solving. Each different function has a different method for doing that. Those are the algebraic things they're called. Okay, reminders, we're finishing chapter 5 this week. That means next week you'll have lots of time set aside to focus on exam prep, and not this coming Friday, but the following Friday, which is April 15th, we'll have our second midterm exam. Okay, remember to reach out if you have any questions or need any help with anything, and I hope you have an enjoyable week.